All right, well, welcome to July now. Ceph Science, Big Cluster, whatever user group meeting here. I'll just give my short little spiel in case people are here that haven't joined before. This is just a very informal, you know, virtual chat that we have, uh, every 2 months for people in the related field of science and research, or really just big clusters in general, I guess. Um, There's a pad link in the chat. There's also in the list email. We kind of keep live notes there and topics. If you have anything you want to talk about, feel free to add it to the topic list. Otherwise, just bring it up at some point. I kind of just go through the topic list and try to keep the conversation going. I'm more of a moderator. There isn't a presentation or anything. So it's an open conversation. Please ask any questions. Feel free to talk about anything Ceph related. And I guess I will just start going through our list here. So first couple things that we kind of just do every meeting is anybody would want to talk about any recent outages they've had, the bugs that caused them, anything like that.
We had a partial outage in our main cluster from 1604 to 1804. And there was a race condition in the if up down scripts in 1804 that meant sometimes our bonded interfaces in the VLANs on them would come up all right, but without a default route. And what that means is that when the server reboots, all its OSDs can talk to the cluster just fine, which means that the cluster remains happy, but the clients then can't talk to an OSD, so that they can talk to them on fine, which gives them the cluster map, and then they try and talk to a particular OSD, and they never get a response because the default route is missing. So the cluster say it was fine, and then some of our virtual machines with their root volume on Ceph, or on the Ceph back volume, suddenly just sort of couldn't perform any I/O, which caused a certain amount of head scratching until we realized what the problem was. And we fixed it by using a later version of if up down, which brings up the default gateway reliably. And we've also added an override to our systemd service files for the OSDs, which means they won't start up if they can't ping one of our bits of essential internal infrastructure, which will mean in future if we have a recurrence of the underlying issue, then Ceph we just won't start on that system and the OSDs will remain down, which is better than the OSDs being in the cluster but unable to actually serve clients.
An interesting one. I had that something similar a long time ago, where the if up networking stack on CentOS. This is probably 4 years ago. Like the CentOS wasn't bringing up the network device before the if up scripts were running, and so this server would come up with no networking. It sounds similar, but.
Yeah. I mean, we've occasionally seen race conditions before, but normally then the failure mode is that usually the bonded interface doesn't come up at all. I've not previously seen it manage to come up seemingly fine, except lacking the default route.
Did this just end up impacting like one or a few OSD hosts, or what was the no terrible outage up from this, hopefully?
Yeah, it affected maybe 3 or 4, but we have 51. So yeah, we spotted it fairly quickly. I guess our systems were a bit unhappy for about half an hour while we scratched our heads and worked out what the problem was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a kind of a relatively short partial outage. but just a bit distressing.
Yeah, a little stuff like that does make it through into the OS sometimes.
And we've not seen this failure mode in our test cluster either. Because it's a race condition, that's the sort of thing that doesn't necessarily turn up on our test cluster. But we, like I say, the newer if up down packages are these. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my case, it was kind of like hardware specific, like in one specific hardware configuration, it affected all the hosts like that. But in, the other one where it's a slightly different, newer model host or whatever, it didn't affect it. So it's kind of possibly similar for your test cluster versus your production stuff.
Hmm.
Anybody else want to share some outages or bugs?
I can share a bit. Yeah, I guess I'm stepping up to the confessional here.
Kind of what it feels like, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So we have we had a 13 petabyte production cluster that was reaching full capacity, and we needed to introduce new hardware. And I was taking my sweet time about getting the new hardware in for various reasons. We had there was a bug in the balancer at some point that wasn't rebalancing. It was basically coming back telling me that the cluster was perfectly balanced, or it was telling me, or it couldn't find solutions that the balancer would run away and basically chop CPU until we stopped it. So there were some issues with the balancer. This is in 12.2.3, I think is what we're no, it's 12.2.12 is what we're on. So we were busy trying to figure out what's going on with the balancer. To sort that out. Then our cluster was getting full, and we suddenly had a whole bunch of near full OSDs. So now it was crisis time. We had to sort this out. The other kind of where we were trying to figure out what to do was how to add new hardware into the cluster, and so we spent a fair bit of time just trying to figure out what the best way forward was. Because we had tried gentle reweight, and it just wasn't really doing what we wanted. I think at the end of the day, the other problem is that we have particularly large PGs. We have a low PG count, and so we ended up with we have 8 terabyte hard drives on our cluster, and our PGs were 100 gigs. So suddenly, when the balancer wanted to rebalance stuff as well, it was kind of shifting 100 gigs around. So you didn't want to do that haphazard in some kind of ad hoc way. You wanted to make sure that it was when it moved stuff around, it wasn't just moving stuff around for the sake of moving stuff around. So we ended up stopping writes to the cluster for 3 days while we added in the new hardware. The way we did that was we used Dan van der Staa's upmap remap. So we basically added all the new hardware with no rebalance set in the cluster. We then basically moved all the PGs back to where they originally were, and then the whole idea was to now kick in the balancer, and the balancer was supposed to rebalance the cluster. However, the problem was and this is probably our own fault once again, as I say, we're kind of stepping up to the confessional here. We had near full OSDs, and because we have particularly large PGs, what was happening was the balancer was wanting to move data onto from near full OSDs to near full OSDs. So it was kind of doing a non-optimal move. Obviously, in terms of the crash map, it was optimal, but in terms of us trying to write data across to the new hardware, it wasn't optimal. So what we ended up doing was ended up creating a few scripts that would take we'd use the OMAP tool and basically work up a whole bunch of upmaps that it will calculate a whole bunch of upmaps. We then filtered that according to ones that were going to drain the near full OSDs and put them onto the new hardware. So we basically had a prioritized balancer. And this prioritized balancer we then ran for like a week or two just to drain out those those full OSDs, and we then kicked in the Ceph balancer, and yeah, the Ceph balancer now runs and happily is rebalancing our cluster. So we went from from basically from a state where it was we were flying pretty close to the sun in terms of what should be allowed in terms of near full OSDs, but then we're able to, as I say, with a couple of scripts, try and figure out carefully how we can just for that little crisis period of a week or two, just to copy the stuff off, prioritize the app maps that would actually take data off the full OSDs and put them onto the two new racks we had added, and that's kind of got us through the woods. And basically now we're happy again. So that was quite I think it was a lesson in how not to add how not to wait until the end to add new hardware. When you want to add new hardware, add it when your cluster's not too full. But if there are problems, there are ways of solving this. I see a raised hand there.
Yeah. Hi, we're in the middle of a similar bit of pain, actually. We've got a Nautilus cluster, and we're using erasure encoding. And due to the COVID, we couldn't get in to add more OSDs until last week. And we had got to a state where we had maybe a third of our OSDs were near full, and a bit of a panic. So we suddenly managed to add 10 more servers to the original 10 and tried to add another 100 OSDs. Well, it all looked good, and then suddenly we realized that 40% of the PGs were locked in the activating state, so we couldn't actually get access to our data at all. And the only way forward then was to weight the OSDs down from their size, which these were 16 terabyte drives we were adding to an 8 terabyte cluster, was to actually weight them down to a terabyte each. Then all the OSDs would activate, and we're slowly now creeping forward, increasing the weight as things start to balance out. And it's a horrible situation to be in, but it's slowly getting there now. So I completely empathize with what you're doing. How full were you? Were you about 90% or 85% on most of your OSDs?
Yeah, we were hitting between 80 and 85% full. Yeah. So and it was. I mean, we have. But then the problem was as well is we had 10 or 20 near full OSDs, but then we had the rest of the OSDs sitting at between 70 and 79%. So the whole cluster was full. And it's kind of not that's the situation you want to find yourself in. But I'm curious to know why were the OSDs not activated? The new ones that you added.
It could be we were using erasure encoding, and it's striped across 10. Each one's striped across 10 servers. So maybe Balancer couldn't work out when I was trying to start up, 5,000 PGs. Where am I going to put all these? And it just got stuck in a loop. I don't know. But the only solution forward we found was actually change the crush weight of the USDs down from 14.5 down to 1, and then slowly start ramping it up. Nothing else worked. So it was an oddball, yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly these aren't situations you want to find yourself in.
No, and it's one of these things where I definitely want to get the money to buy the disks ahead of schedule, and run the cluster half full. That'd be ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Yeah, so Kevin, that's my confessional. I feel like I feel a weight lifted off my shoulders.
Yep.
You've been absolved.
Yeah. Fantastic, thank you.
mean,
Does
I have a
anybody?
bug that I'm waiting for, but I stuck it in the upgrading to Octopus section, which is just kind of where it landed. But maybe people have other bugs or outages they want to talk about before we move on.
Kind of going back to Thomas's thing, does anybody increase their near full ratios on their OSDs since drives are so big now from the defaults? Wasn't it like 85% or something? I think I increased mine to like 90 for near full.
How heterogeneous are your drive sizes?
Not very. I got 6, 8, 10, and 12.
All of our drives are 8 terabytes, and we only just started adding 16 terabyte drives to them. So our clusters are, until now, homogeneous.
Yeah, I don't know. I just figured
6 terabytes drives everywhere.
That's an interesting thought, though, Kevin. Yeah, I would have to think about that. We're getting ready to add storage. We actually have it just sitting on pallets in our data center, waiting to be racked and everything. But I think I'm a little worried because the person who spec'd it out was really going for a price performance ratio, and so we ended up with machines with 60 hard drive, JBODs that are 720 terabytes. So it's going to be enormous nodes, and I'm just a little worried that, if you lose one of these nodes now, it's, a tenth of your cluster while you reboot it or whatever. Kind of right at that threshold of just being kind of uncomfortable to have that many eggs in one basket.
I think that if left teams on devices, without having some sort of external deadline, I think that sometimes we can tend to, let's make this piece the best that we can.
Were you on mute?
Yeah, it was. I was just saying that those are some pretty big nodes. I wouldn't be comfortable with those in my cluster. It's a lot, but depends on the cluster. I prefer to go smaller and wider instead of big and less.
So all of our Ceph nodes are that size, with they're all 60 disk JBODs, but we've got quite a lot of them. So I think we've got 51 in our production cluster. So if we lose one, okay, that's still a fair proportion of the cluster, but it's not a big deal. But they're only 6 terabyte drives each, because largely that was driven by cost considerations, and I guess more smaller spindles might give us slightly more IOs. I'm not sure. Well, I think it's perhaps less about the raw capacity of any given node and more what proportion of your cluster is in a particular node. The more nodes you have, the less proportionate loss one of them is.
Yeah. Seems like a balance that every Ceph admin has to struggle with at some point.
I mean, our thinking was perhaps more, how many drives can we fit in one box and still expect to push them all fairly hard, given the network and CPU and PCI capacity of those boxes. And we have 4U Supermicro servers that seem reasonably good in terms of, having enough performance to drive 60 spinning Rust disks.
Anybody else have outages they want to do here? Maybe not. All right. Next on
it
the
looks
list.
looks like Anne is talking, but it might be muted. Can't hear.
Yeah, she's trying to talk, but in chat she pasted the link to the house about the memory usage in USD process.
Huh. Maybe try rejoining Anne. Not sure what else. I think people have had that problem before.
Yeah, I had that problem, which is why I'm phoning in, because I found twice now when I've used the computer audio, I can hear everyone but not speak, or at least not be heard.
Well, Anne, if you do figure out or join through like a phone or something, feel free to type in with your stuff. Oh, she left. All right. Well, she's rejoining. I also forwarded a thing for Gabriel's at the Diamond Light Source. He was going to be given a demo of his Ceph on RAM. See, Gabriel, if you're on, if you want to say anything about that. Otherwise, I think most of the people here probably saw that email.
Yeah. So if you've seen the email, it's just going to be a demonstration of using Ceph and RAM with some in-house technology such as Savi, and then like general use, so using S3 with it, and then just using RAIDOS to show like performance and scaling when using RAM.
Yeah, sounded interesting. So, yeah, you all saw that email probably. Feel free to join in. Could be interesting. And we see you're back. You want us to try saying something? Can't hear you, sorry. So how's life with Octopus? Buddy got stuff they want to speak to with that. Migration problems, good, bad, CentOS 8 issues. I think this is where, was Liam, did you put that bug in there?
Right. So
Yeah.
we upgraded probably about 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, something like that, after they released the point release that fixed that corruption issue that they had in 15.2.2. So we upgraded to 15.2.3 from Nautilus, and that all went pretty smoothly. The main thing that I noticed immediately is, I looked at the performance graphs, all the diagnostic information about the machines, and the IO weight had gone way down. I noticed on the OSDs, it was at 4, it went down to about 1. It was about a 25% of IO weight of what it had been on these OSD nodes before. So that was interesting. And everything seemed fine for about a week, and then we started noticing that a lot of users were having problems with their face accounting being incorrect on Octopus. So, we would have, users, and it would say that they were using about 50 times as much space as they were actually using. And so this actually created a real problem because we quota users on our cluster. So basically they would hit their quota prematurely because the accounting was wrong and not be able to write any data. So we did a little bit of testing. Was there anything that we were missing? And what we ended up doing is just rolling back to Nautilus just for the Rados gateway nodes. So we left all the mons and the OSDs are running Octopus right now and have been for the last couple weeks. But the Rados gateway nodes are back down on Nautilus. And then we were able to resync the stats on each individual user to correct their space accounting. So I put in a bug for this. It's marked as high, and it's been assigned to somebody, so maybe it'll get worked on. I couldn't see any evidence from any of the mailing lists or anywhere else that this was a widespread problem. So I'm not sure if other people would encounter it if they upgraded, but so I guess we're just not really sure how widespread it might be. There's nothing really very special about our cluster where we've been doing anything weird with like versioning or bucket sharding or anything like that would mess up the stats. So not really sure.
Interesting.
In terms of running mix, we were a little worried, right, that there would be like some sort of internal data structure that was basically couldn't downgrade and would cause problems. So, we tested it in a test cluster, just going backwards, and it seemed to have worked. And then we did it in production, and it's been fine. The other thing that we noticed when we upgraded to Octopus is it seems like they have another Rados gateway bug. It seems like all the bugs that I hit were in Rados gateway, so maybe if you don't use too much Rados gateway, this won't be a problem for you. But there was basically this one message that was being logged at the wrong level, and we ship all of our logs on all of our machines to log aggregation. And it was logging about 100. It was logging the same exact message about some like fence posting error or something in the Rados gateway code 174,000 times a minute, and it was actually creating performance problems for the cluster to just keep up with doing so much logging. And so we had to temporarily change the logging levels and then go back to what we were running on Nautilus and then set back to logging the way it was, and that fixed things. So just another thing maybe that I had kind of forgotten about that's maybe a good thing for other people to keep an eye on is just what your logging volume is when you do a major version upgrade, because that caught us and started causing some actual performance problems. And everything else was great. It's just those two problems.
How did the downgrade process go for the gateways? Did you just stop them, install the older packages, turn them back on, and now everything worked?
Yeah, I actually just it wasn't quite as easy. I couldn't actually do the downgrade through we run rel through the yum mechanism. I actually had to uninstall the packages and then just use we use Ceph deploy actually, so just use that to redeploy the packages and insert the nodes back into the cluster. Once you get it was the first time was a little took a little bit of trial and error, but after that it only took about 5 minutes per node. We have about 10 Rados gateway nodes. So I wonder, is it anybody else upgraded to the Octopus yet?
No.
Yeah, do you have any thoughts about the better performance on Octopus?
Yeah, I mean, I think the performance definitely does seem a little better. Even in our we're noticing a lot in our Cephas cluster. It seems better. And I guess the problem with that is since the throughput of the cluster has actually been increased, we have enough clients that they're still kind of just saturating, the extra performance that's now available. And it's caused some other issues for us around, for the first time ever, like we've had this cluster for uh, 8 years, and we're now just after upgrading getting messages like about deep scrubs timing out. Like it basically seems like not all of our PGs can deep scrub themselves once a week. And that just started with Octopus. I've never seen that before. I don't really want to just give up and just say, well, you don't have to scrub as often or something. So I haven't quite decided what to do about that yet. I've just been dealing with it for now, but haven't found a permanent solution to deep scrubs, for example, timing out. But I suspect that it's actually related to the performance characteristics of Octopus. Because basically, if you have more cluster activity going on, if you're it basically won't kick off deep scrubs, right? I think that's the thing. Like it has to wait for it to be relatively quiet on a PG to be doing the deep scrubbing, and they have ratios and thresholds for that.
Liam, just wondering, you're using Ceph a lot on your cluster. What client are you using? The kernel client, but what kernel version are you using on your clients, and what OS are they?
Yeah, these would all be RHEL 7 nodes for the most part. So I guess they would be using the look.
Default kernel.
Yeah. Would be 310.
Okay.
So as heavily patched. I mean, it's
Well,
dash 1100 something.
We found we've had to use the ML kernel to stop Ceph locking up, but we're using Nautilus on Ceph, but we found fairly heavily, but we haven't seen these OSDs not scrubbing. So, but
Right.
through the 310 kernel for us it works for a bit, and then the machine locks up and you can't access the mount. But putting the 5.2 or the more recent ML kernels on fixes those bugs. Probably fresh bugs as well, but at least FFS works.
For what is the ML kernel? I have a bit of a neophyte here.
There's oh gosh, if you go to I don't remember what the repo is for it. Somebody else could probably remind me. There's the mainline kernel, and it's a stable-ish kernel which tracks the release one and gets patched.
Okay.
So you can get it from one of the extra repositories.
I see it. Okay.
If you search for ML kernel, you'll find it. Yep.
Do you run CentOS, or do you run RHEL, or what?
We're running Scientific Linux, so it's effectively RHEL.
Scientific. Okay.
Yeah. Until 8 comes out, then it'll be CentOS. So it's starting months is going.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Right. The other thing for people, the other thing for people to consider around an Octopus upgrade is that there are changes to the requirements for the OS that you can run. So I need to upgrade all of my mons to RHEL 8 now. They're all on RHEL 7 currently, because I had to disable some of the plugins that have Python 3 requirements that it can't satisfy, or they just haven't built the packages for RHEL 7 to move all of the manager modules work. Like Prometheus was one we had to disable. The RESTful API manager had to disable. I think that was mainly it.
Yeah. We'll hit that at some point, but it's stable. Leave it at the
Right.
moment for us.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I'm happy to be people's guinea pig if more people in a year or two are having an interest in upgrading eventually. Hopefully, I'll have taken a lot of the pain and they'll have fixed some of the issues. So I think I'm just a little surprised that it seems like the Ceph developer community seems to focus a lot on new features, and it takes many point releases to really get something that's stable that you'd actually want to use on a large production cluster. Like for example, in Octopus, right, they put a lot of effort into Ceph ADM, and it means that there are, more fundamental issues with some of the existing pieces, like for example, what I hit with RGW, even though we're to release. Go ahead.
It's interesting what you say about finding lots of trouble in RGWs. We're nowhere near running Octopus yet, but the thing I seem to spend most of my time on with our Ceph cluster is dealing with niggly little problems around the Rados gateways. Currently, we've had a rash of multi-part uploads getting mangled by dynamic resharding, which then involves a lot of fiddly unpicking of the data structures around buckets. But it does seem that, I don't know, but the Rados gateways, either it's something that not so many people are using, less love, or it's just a bit more complicated than some of the other bits. I don't know, but it does seem to be the thing that I spend most of my time looking at compared to the rest of the Ceph cluster work.
I mean, I think maybe one explanation is, I think the RGW sub-project has been lucky that a lot of the people who were there from the very beginning are still there, like Yehuda, who has been, kind of one of the principal developers there, still worked for Inktank, still works for Red Hat. But it seems like a lot of the folks that get assigned maybe the day-to-day sort of feature and bug fix tickets in RGW are kind of newer people in the project. It's just something I've noticed. So maybe there's not as much engineering maturity in RGW as there used to be. I mean, they just keep adding features too, right? They spend a lot of time on, versioning, multi-site syncing, other stuff that maybe just it's becoming more complicated, and you have to put the complexity somewhere, and it's just maybe becoming a little bit less reliable over time. It's kind of my impression. But just keep putting in bug fixes, right, and hope for the best. There's probably lots of people maybe who just have problems and they don't speak up, right? So you don't know how bad it really is. I mean, it's been pretty reliable. I don't want to poo-poo it too much. And software is hard, but I would like it to be a little bit more reliable this far into releases. Gives me a lot of heartburn.
Well, we do appreciate you being the guinea pig.
Happy to help.
I've been looking at Octopus and I've been slowly, I was trying to, not do too many major upgrades while stuff working from home, but since it seems like it might be a long time, or even longer than it has been, I might have to start actually looking at doing some of those sort of upgrades from home.
Liam, did you try out Ceph admin? The Ceph, what's it? Ceph ADM. The orchestrator for in Octopus, or you?
Right. So I haven't used it yet, and I haven't converted my cluster into a Ceph ADM cluster. And probably the main blocker that I'm waiting for is to upgrade things to RHEL 8. I think from what I've been reading, it would probably be easier to do once I had upgraded things to RHEL 8 the old way.
Okay, yeah, because one of the guys we work with was playing around with Octopus, and had some interesting issues with the Rados gateway, in fact, as it turns out, and the orchestrator. So I was just wondering if you had some experiences, but I think we still need to play around there and see what.
Yeah, Tom, that was me. I guess I was going to ask on the call if anyone has managed to deploy RGWs with Ceph ADM, because I can deploy OSDs and mons and everything perfectly, but as soon as I try to do any Rados gateway admin commands, like creating the realm and things, they just hang. It seems to create the .rgw.root pool, but that's it. And all the other Rados gateway admin commands just fail. They just hang there indefinitely. Otherwise, it's great.
You were adding new daemons into a cluster, or were you just converting existing daemons into Ceph ADM?
Completely new cluster.
Okay.
Couple of machines, we were testing it out, and as I say, getting the mons deployed and getting OSDs up and running, that's all perfect. But I don't know if there's some sort of weird bootstrapping thing where you actually need an instance of a Rados gateway running before the Rados gateway admin commands will work. I traced it a bit, but we didn't have enough time to really go and delve into what it was blocking on. But if you're sort of following the instructions as listed, which is about you do the things like creating realms before you actually deploy RGW instances, those commands just seem to hang. I tried on 15.2.4 and the sort of master as well. Both of those had the same problem.
Are you able to circumvent Ceph ADM if, say you ran into this problem and the rest of your cluster is using Ceph ADM? Do you still have a release valve to run kind of the old commands to insert RGW daemons?
I think you could, yeah. And I think that's one of the sort of potential issues is if you end up with partially containerized services. It's probably fine, but it's not ideal. And I guess I'm just interested in whether I was holding something wrong or anyone else has encountered it, particularly the RGW side of Ceph ADM. Either all is well and I'm holding it wrong, or no one's tried it.
We're using Ceph Ansible everywhere, so I've not tried it.
Yeah, all our production stuff is Ceph Ansible, but this is one of the things we want to test out because I think for us, most of our environment is very containerized. So having containerized deployments would fit in very well with our current infrastructure. So I think it is the future for us, but we're not confident yet.
Are you able to speak about how the disk mapping works if you're using containerized deployments there? Like, for example, one of the things that just scares me about thinking about doing is that we have big SAS JBODs, right, and that are using multipath. So each of our drives has 2 addresses, and then they get put together into a single multipath device on the host. And so that's what we use when we're trying to associate a drive and an OSD together. So I'm just wondering, like, do you have a layout that looks anything like that if you were going to use Ceph ADM and containerize your OSDs?
We haven't tried the sort of detailed specification format you can use. I've tried both the consume all available devices and choose individual devices manually. And the all available devices seems to do a pretty good job of choosing the right things. But I think we would look into a kind of a spec file dictating exactly what type of devices we wanted to use in that all available devices. It certainly went wrong once when I didn't pay much attention to what it had marked as being available for use. But yeah, I haven't delved further than the sort of bare bones of using that. But I think that's one of the things we want to try next when we fiddle around with it.
Do you have separate devices or like SSDs or something that store the data journals, the block databases?
No. So what we have an NVMe pool which we use for indexing for the RGW. So we put the metadata pools on that. But in terms of the OSDs and their associated walls and things like that, those are all on the spinning disks.
Okay. Because that was kind of my question. Is we have separate devices that do the what they used to call the journaling, which is now whatever the RocksDB and stuff. But I was just wondering how smart is Ceph ADM really? Like if I have 60 drives in a chassis and I have 10 solid state disks, is it gonna correctly kind of figure out like that I want to use 10 spinning disks with one of these SSDs for journaling? Or I mean I need to do some more investigation myself. I'm not expecting you to answer that, but I was just curious about how smart is it really?
That service specification YAML file that you can make looks pretty all-encompassing in terms of what you can filter on. So certainly things like models and vendors and paths and sizes and things like that, rotational or not, and you can put certain placement patterns on. So certainly if they're easily distinguishable in certain groups, I think you could probably do it quite easily with that spec file. I mean, certainly looks like you can specify where does a DB go, where does a WAL go, where is the actual OSD data going. That all looks quite doable. But yeah, we haven't kicked the tires in anger on that at all.
Okay, that seems pretty encouraging though.
Yeah, I'm hopeful that works. And as I say, apart from the RGW side, the rest of it was really nice, and it's very nice to have containerized services. I think that's definitely something we can do in the future.
With all the Ceph ADM talk, is anybody doing the Dockerized yet? I'll take that as a no. I don't think most of us are too eager to Dockerize our big Ceph clusters.
There certainly hasn't seemed to be much enthusiasm in the last couple of these meetings. Dockerizing things.
Mm-hmm. That's good to keep asking, see if anybody's ever going to take the dive into actually doing that and tell us how it is. So one interesting feature I saw in Octopus was live image migration for RBDs between pools. Has anybody actually tried that out yet? Oh, probably not, since I think Liam's the only one running Octopus, so.
And I haven't tried it, so.
Yeah, that sounded interesting as long as your backend app or whatever that's using it maintain its map or whatever throughout the pool migration. That could be a cool feature. One thing I thought was worth mentioning, if anybody didn't see it, Dan from CERN did a tech talk in June about their bug of the year with the LZ4 compression bit flipping they were seeing. It's pretty interesting. So if you haven't seen that, it's fairly short. It's only like a half hour or something. There's a YouTube link in the pad. Feel free to, turn that on in the background and listen to it. It's a very interesting problem. And unfortunately, the first really big outage in a long time. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about? Ceph related? Anything? All right. We're coming up against the hour mark anyways here. Sound like a good chat today. The next one will be in September. Usually the 4th Wednesday, maybe the 5th Wednesday of September. No, I have a conflict on the 4th Wednesday probably, but we'll see what happens. Unless somebody else wants to moderate in place of me.
We'd miss you too much, Kevin. I don't think we can do it without you.
Yeah.
Also, I'm on holiday that 4th Wednesday and back on the 5th Wednesday.
Oh, okay. That works for Matthew too. So maybe that's a good thing. I know Dan from CERN was also on this week. That's why he hasn't joined us. I don't know if anybody else from CERN actually ended up joining or not. Anyways, I'll send out those emails a week or two ahead of time, as usual. If anybody is new on the call, I do send the emails out to the Ceph users list. It's easy to miss stuff on there. So I also have like a private list of the attendees. So if you want to get those emails, go put your name and email address in that Ceph pad, and I'll add you to the private email list. That hopefully that calendar invite actually worked this time. Other than that, thanks for joining, and we'll talk to y'all in 2 months, and hopefully no terrible outages to hear about next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
See you later.
Thanks all. Good to chat.
Good chat, absolutely. Cheers.